There is a bird in the tropical rainforests of northeastern Australia and New Guinea that has no idea it's supposed to be extinct. Every other large predatory dinosaur lineage went 66 million years ago when the asteroid arrived and the sky went dark and the food chains collapsed, and the most dominant animals on the planet were methodically removed from a game they had been winning for over 150 million years. The cassowary was there for that. It survived it. And in the time between then and now, it has made exactly one meaningful evolutionary decision, which was to stop flying, because the cassowary looked at the available evidence and determined that flight was a resource allocation it did not need to make given the alternative it had developed. The alternative was a 5-inch dagger on its foot. That is the cassowary's answer to the question of what a large bird does when it can no longer access the aerial advantage. It grows to 6 feet tall, develops a casque on its head that looks like a helmet and may function like one, covers its body in dense black feathers that look less like plumage and more like armor, and attaches to its inner toe a keratinous claw, so long and so sharp that the forward kick it delivers with it has been documented opening prey from sternum to abdomen in a single strike. The cassowary did not become a different kind of animal when it lost flight. It became a more committed version of the same animal. And 66 million years later, it is still here, in the same rainforests, with the same operational philosophy and the same complete absence of any instinct suggesting it should be afraid of you. The casque is where this video needs to start because the casque is the detail that most coverage of the cassowary either dismisses or misunderstands, and which, once you understand it properly, reframes the entire animal. The casque is a helmet-shaped protrusion that grows from the top of the cassowary's skull and is made of a keratinous material over a foam-like core that is structurally similar to the material used in impact-absorbing helmets. For most of the history of cassowary research, the casque was classified as a display structure, something related to dominance signaling or mate selection, and the reasoning was that nobody had observed the cassowary doing anything with it that required it to exist. More recent research has produced 3 competing hypotheses about the casque's primary function, and none of them make the cassowary less alarming. The first is that it is used for pushing through dense rainforest undergrowth. The cassowary moves through vegetation so thick that a structure capable of parting it without injury to the skull would confer a real advantage, and the casque shape is consistent with that function. The second is that it dissipates heat. The cassowary is a large animal in a hot, humid environment, and the casque is heavily vascularized in a way that suggests it might function as a radiator. The third, and most interesting, is that it is a low-frequency sound amplifier. Research suggests the cassowary communicates in infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, and the casque may function as a resonating chamber that enhances the production or reception of these frequencies. If that third hypothesis is correct, and the evidence supporting it is substantial, the cassowary is communicating on a channel you cannot hear, in a frequency range that travels further through dense vegetation than audible sound, in a rainforest where you cannot see more than a few meters in any direction. The cassowary's territory is defined by communications you are physically incapable of perceiving, and the casque on its head is the antenna. The kick is the part of this conversation that most people know exists, and almost nobody has the correct mental model of. The cassowary does not peck. It does not scratch in the way chickens scratch. The cassowary kicks with a forward motion, a direct strike aimed at a target, using the inner toe as the primary weapon. That inner toe carries a claw that on a large adult female can measure 5 inches in length. It is straight, it is extremely sharp at the tip, and it is deployed with the full leg strength of an animal that weighs up to 130 pounds and stands 6 feet tall. The kick's force has been estimated at comparable to a professional boxer's punch, delivered to whatever part of your body the cassowary has decided to aim at, from a leg that operates with the mechanical advantage of a much longer lever arm than a human arm. The documented injuries from cassowary attacks include deep lacerations, puncture wounds that have reached internal organs, broken bones from the impact force of the kick even without the claw making contact, and at least 2 human fatalities in recorded history. One in 1926 in Australia, and one in 2019 in Florida when a man was killed by a cassowary he had been keeping as a pet. In the 2019 case, the bird was reported to be over 100 pounds, and living on a private property. The man had fallen near the bird's enclosure. The cassowary did what a cassowary does when it perceives something has entered its space and is behaving in a way that registers as threatening. It kicked. Once. The single kick was sufficient. The size is contextually important in a way that pictures don't prepare you for, because the cassowary's physical presence in person is categorically different from seeing it described or photographed. Adult female cassowaries, which are larger than the males, a reversal of the pattern in most bird species, stand up to 6 feet tall at the top of the casque. They weigh up to 130 pounds. They are the second heaviest bird on Earth after the ostrich, which they predate in terms of evolutionary lineage, and the third tallest. They have vestigial wings that are functionally useless for flight, but which still carry modified feathers that look less like flight feathers and more like thick, curved quills, stiff enough to have been used historically as pipe cleaners, which is a sentence that tells you something about the structural integrity of cassowary feather material. The black plumage against the bright red and blue bare skin of the neck creates a visual that is difficult to describe as anything other than prehistoric. The cassowary does not look like a bird you should approach. It looks like something that was classified as dangerous by evolution before the classification system existed, and the visual information it presents is consistent with that assessment in every detail. The neck skin alone, the bare blue and red skin visible against the black feathers, has been described by field researchers as one of those rare cases in biology where the warning signal is also simply aesthetically accurate. It doesn't just look like something you shouldn't touch. It looks like something that has been here since before the concept of you existed and is operating on a timeline on which your specific presence is a very minor and very recent development. The territory and the temperament are two things that need to be addressed together because separating them creates a misleading picture of when the cassowary is dangerous. The cassowary is not continuously aggressive. It is not like the hippopotamus, which maintains a state of territorial tension that makes any proximity dangerous. Under normal conditions, with adequate space, the cassowary will avoid humans. It is shy. It is solitary. It will typically move away from human presence if it detects it early enough and has a clear path to do so. The cassowary's danger is not the danger of an animal that wants to engage. It is the danger of an animal that, when it decides engagement is necessary, is comprehensively equipped to end that engagement decisively and has no instinctive calibration that moderates the force of its response relative to the size of the perceived threat. The triggers are the key variable. Cassowaries that have been fed by humans, and in the tourist areas of northeastern Queensland this has been a persistent problem despite explicit warnings, lose their avoidance behavior. Once a cassowary associates humans with food, it approaches rather than retreats. And an animal with no flight instinct and a 5-inch dagger on its foot approaching you because it has associated you with a food source is a very different interaction from an animal approaching you because it wants to be near you. The cassowary's approach does not modulate based on your response to it. If you retreat, it may follow. If you stand your ground, it may kick. The decision tree the cassowary is running in that interaction is not one you have reliable input into. The other trigger is the nesting and chick rearing season, during which even cassowaries that have previously been reliably avoidant will charge, and during which male cassowaries, who are entirely responsible for incubating eggs and raising chicks in this species, become a threat to anything that approaches the nest site. The male cassowary, which weighs around 120 pounds and has the same 5-inch claw the females carry, is functionally a guard animal during the brooding period and has no concept of proportionate response. The diet is one of the more surprising elements of the cassowary's profile because it positions the animal in an ecological role that makes it genuinely essential to the rainforest it inhabits rather than simply dangerous to other things in it. The cassowary is a frugivore. It eats primarily fruit, including fruit from plants that are toxic to most other animals. Its digestive system can process seeds and pass them intact across a range that reflects the bird's substantial territory, making it one of the most important seed dispersers in the Australasian rainforest. There are plant species in the Daintree rainforest that are entirely dependent on the cassowary for seed dispersal, plants that produce fruit too large for any other rainforest animal to swallow whole and carry. Remove the cassowary and those plant species decline. Remove those plant species, and the food web they support restructures. The cassowary is not just a dangerous animal living in the rainforest. It is infrastructure for the rainforest's continued operation, embedded in the ecosystem at a depth that reflects 66 million years of mutual development. This is what makes the cassowary's endangered status in Australia not just a conservation concern, but an ecological emergency that most of the public conversation about it fails to communicate with appropriate urgency. There are estimated to be between 1,200 and 1,500 cassowaries remaining in the wild in Australia. The primary threats are habitat loss, vehicle strikes on roads that cross cassowary territory, and domestic dog attacks in areas where cassowary range overlaps with residential development. An animal that has survived 66 million years, including an extinction event that ended the dinosaurs, is being successfully threatened by cars and dogs in a country where it has lived for the entire duration of modern human civilization and for millions of years before that civilization existed. The relationship between the cassowary and the history of the people who have shared its landscape is worth acknowledging because it provides context that the purely zoological framing doesn't. The indigenous communities of northeastern Queensland and New Guinea have lived alongside cassowaries for thousands of years, and their traditional knowledge of the bird reflects a relationship built on genuine respect rather than the kind of fascination from a safe distance that characterizes most contemporary Western engagement with dangerous wildlife. Cassowary feathers, bones, and casques have been used in ceremonial contexts across multiple Papua New Guinean cultures. The birds have been semi-domesticated in some communities, not tamed, exactly, but incorporated into village life in a way that reflects detailed generational knowledge of their behavior and triggers. This knowledge, accumulated over thousands of years of direct observation, consistently characterizes the cassowary as something that deserves to be treated with the same category of caution you extend to something that can genuinely hurt you, which is the correct characterization and one that takes most Westerners an encounter or a documentary to arrive at. The cassowary's evolutionary lineage runs back to the ratites, the group of large flightless birds that includes ostriches, emus, rheas, and kiwis, and the ratite lineage itself runs back to a common ancestor that was present before the breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana. The cassowary's ancestors were geographically distributed across what is now South America, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Antarctica before those landmasses separated, and the descendants of that ancestral stock independently evolved large body size and flightlessness on multiple continents in response to the ecological opportunities created by the extinction of large dinosaur predators. The cassowary is not just an old bird. It is a member of a lineage that was already old when the continents were arranged differently. It has been here, in some form, for longer than Australia has been a separate landmass. And it is still running the same operation. Still producing infrasound through a casque that functions as an antenna, still dispersing the seeds of plants that evolved specifically around it, still carrying a 5-inch dagger on its foot, still moving through rainforest undergrowth so dense that most other animals cannot follow it, still being shy enough to avoid conflict when it can and comprehensively equipped enough to end conflict decisively when it can't, still doing, in other words, exactly what it was doing before the asteroid arrived and changed everything for almost everything else. The cassowary is a living dinosaur, and it has absolutely not forgotten. Drink water. Hug your mother. If you see a cassowary on a road in Queensland, slow down and let it cross. It has been here significantly longer than the road. See you in the next one.